the 5 steps of value you need to incorporate into your illustrations. So I've talked about this a little bit before in some of my videos in drawing and painting, but I really want to emphasize it today. I want to show you some examples and how the idea of just focusing on 5 steps of value really helped me, and I think it can help you as well. So when I'm talking about 5 steps of value, it's the difference from light to dark. So often I'm drawing this little chart here, right? Where you can kind of see in my scribbles here, if you've got 5 values, I'm talking about these little squares at the bottom of this. The great thing about using this toned paper, for example, is that you've got this beautiful middle ground already created for you. Then in this case, you're using black and white color pencils. You're using black to draw anything darker. You're using white, obviously, to draw anything lighter. But the idea is, if we go back to this little chart here, the idea is that you've got the tone of the paper, which is like your step 3. Your step 1 is just straight up white, where you are jamming in that white color pencil. Step 2 is also lighter than the middle ground, but just a little bit. Step 3, obviously, the paper once again. Step 4 is a little bit darker than that. Step 5 is a lot darker. And the idea is that you've got this even range of values. Right above those squares, you can kind of see the idea when you're shading. What you don't want to do in the case of these color pencils at the top, I showed what happens when you mix black and white color pencils. It makes this really awful, unpredictable gray. You want to transition that by kind of shading into the tone of the paper and letting the paper stand as its own value before starting to shade darker or lighter, depending on which way you're going. Okay. So the idea is when I do an illustration like this, I'm honestly only focusing on 5 values. There's probably a lot more. If you were to scan this into a computer and ask it how many shades of value are there, I'm sure there's hundreds. There's probably thousands of, again, the difference going from light to dark. There's all kinds of crazy values in there. But I am not a computer. I'm not smart enough to, oh my gosh, I remember when I was in art school, we would have to make these value grids on white paper, which is a lot more difficult, and we would have to make 20 squares. It was really hard to do, and I guess it was kind of an interesting assignment, but honestly, I didn't feel like it was making me understand value any better when it comes to an illustration. But I had a couple teachers after that say, no, for any good illustration, you only need 5 values. And once I started focusing on that, that was a lot easier to wrap my head around. And my illustrations, my rendering, my figure drawing, it all got so much better. That's all I'm focusing on. So Mando here, you can kind of tell, really, it's got the tone of the paper. There are areas like the bag holding Grogu here. That bag is mostly the tone of the paper, right? I've got a couple areas where I've got some scribbles in there where it gets a little bit darker, areas where it gets a little bit lighter. Boba Fett's helmet. Boba Fett's helmet is, it's pretty battered here, but it's kind of a middle-of-the-road red and a middle-of-the-road green. So a lot of the helmet is really just kind of middle of the road. Same with Din Djarin here. It's kind of middle of the road, and then I just focused on the areas that get a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. You can see here clearly this area right here on either sides of his frohawk get a little bit lighter with color pencil, and then I really got bright with some of those highlights there. But there's a definite separation between the step 2 and the step 1, and then obviously the darks as well. There's areas that get a little bit darker and then areas that get a lot darker. This area right under the helmet here, you can see there are areas that are like a step 4 darker than the tone of the paper, and then there's obviously step 5, which gets a lot darker. When you see it all together, it makes magic. So again, this is a little bit more simplified, but it's got some nice character to it. There really is just 5 steps of value. And then sometimes you can get a little more tonal with the shading, but honestly, I'm still focusing on those 5 steps of value because I'm not smart enough to make it any more complicated than that. 5 steps of value. Now, let's take it a step further. Jumping into color, I'll be honest, I'm really kind of approaching it the same way. Yeah, we get into color. What color is it? And mixing color, and there's color harmony and color theory, and that's a whole separate thing. But honestly, value, even when working in color, is so important. It really is how we see things, and it is, even when working in full color, value is everything. And so I'm always kind of thinking about value with any color that I use. I'm kind of splitting it up in my mind anyway into those 5 values, and it really just helps me understand what I am illustrating that much more. It helps me. Does it help you? All right, rock and roll. Thank you guys for hanging out with me once again. Yo, throw me some likes, throw me some comments. What do you guys think about illustrating value? Does this help you? And if you haven't already, please subscribe. All right, I'll be back next week with more juice. I will see you guys then. Thanks. Bye-bye.